This session will be available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch it again at a later date. So look for that if you missed something and you want to go back and hear it again. We will be putting the link for CEUs into the chat box as we get towards the end of this presentation. This will be the final session of the week and today, so you will fill out your form for everything that you attended today and submit that. Then we will be getting back in touch with you. You'll get an email from us, letting you know what the next steps are for those CEUs. But we'll get attendance checked and everything will be worked out, and we'll be in touch with you. We'll also be putting the link to our donation page in there as well. So if you're able to donate it and you're a professional, please do so. Again, I'll remind you, these things go to student awards, general enrichment funds, and general scholarship funds. So if you're able to do that, we will drop those links in the chat as well. I was reviewing the participants list, and I noticed a couple people previously had profile names that are not your actual name. So if you would, make sure your actual name is in your profile, and that's what's showing up in your window, because that's how we will check the attendance for this. So without that, we won't be able to verify your attendance, and therefore you wouldn't get those CEUs. So without that, we are going to go ahead and move into our last session. We have Marianne Brett with us today. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She also has an MBA. Marianne graduated from the University of Michigan School of Social Work in 2007. She's had a diverse career in many social work arenas. She combines practical problem solving and project management practices from the business world to macro and micro levels of social work. So currently she runs her own private practice specializing in anxiety disorders and trauma-focused therapy. So thank you very much, Marianne, for joining us today. I will turn it over to you.
Hello. All right, well, happy Friday, everybody. April Fools. Happy April Fools, all those things. This is more, I don't know if how many of you guys have been here throughout the week, but the informational sessions so far throughout the week have been so informative and like bullet points, and I'm like screenshotting all the slides and things like that. And envisioning this talk, I really want it to be more of a conversation and more thought-provoking as opposed to like, taking notes. So please feel free to, I think there's 36 of us here, which is great. I'm happy you guys are all here, but I do think that's a small enough group. Feel free to interrupt me or talk or put questions in the chat. I'm sure Austin, if people have a question and you think it's relevant, feel free to just interrupt me. I'd much rather this feel kind of more like it would in person, because I think we all are missing that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
So business as social work, right? It's a funny idea, and some that I think social workers would even maybe find offensive, right? Like we're not business people, we're mission driven, we're value driven. We aren't about the bottom line. But at the same time, I disagree with that intellectually and professionally, because this is our career. This is our job. We are professionally minded, serious professionals, for like lack of a better word, and to keep using that word over and over again. And so I want to start off today by let me open up the chat. By opening up the chat, and while I give you a brief background onto kind of how I got to where I am now, give me an idea of everybody or whoever wants to or just shout out, type in, shout out, whatever you want to do. What do you think social workers do? If somebody was like, oh, you're a social worker, without giving them your job title, like if I wasn't going to say I'm a therapist in a private practice, what do social workers do? Okay, advocate, that's true. That's one of my favorite parts of this job. That's one of the main ones. That's actually back to my background. I'll get back on track now. Which is, in undergrad, I knew I was just very socially justice minded. I was not called to do that, but intellectually curious about that. And just that's how I saw the world working together. And so I started teaching writing in men's prisons and juvenile children facilities, at the same time earning money by being an ABA therapist with nonverbal autistic people. And I didn't have experience with either of those in my background. So it was very eye-opening to me. And the best career advice that I got at that moment in time, meet people where they are. Thank you, Wendy. That's exactly another thing that's hard to really pin down. Connect people with resources, the middleman. Yep, exactly how it's so varied. So many different things. We wear so many hats. So when I was working in the men's prison, I actually got the best career advice from one of the people in my classes, one of the inmates. He was not trying to give me career advice, but he was just talking and writing about his own life. And he said he'd been in prison. It was a maximum security prison. He was going to be there for life. And he'd probably been there for a while, maybe 20 years. And he told me that he was just constantly surprised every day on how much that he didn't know about the world before he ended up in prison when he was like 22 in life by the time he was 22. And how he wished that there was a way to teach kids to know what they don't know. And it's such a simple idea, but it really has driven me professionally to always be making sure that I know what I don't know. That will be the theme throughout how I view social work as a business, right? Because the reality is social work is a very unique business, right? We do advocate, we do wear many hats. We are actually uniquely designed and on purpose to find needs. If we discover a need, that's our job. We discover an area of underserved clients. We discover a new social injustice. We are people who grew up without a voice, who become social workers to help give a voice to the community that we came from. So many different reasons, but that basically means co-workers, maybe we have a magic wand. Yeah, exactly. I wish I hold a pen. I'm always wishing this was a magic wand. Somebody in the chat wrote, we have magic wands. But oh, I didn't know if someone was going to join in. Okay, so really what I think that means is because we are always discovering the problems, we are also then responsible for finding funding sources, for for getting advocacy, getting buy-in to the problem that we've either newly discovered or are trying to help give a voice to.
Marianne, hand up from one of the students.
Oh, sure, go for it.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think if you look at it generally speaking, we help people come to a general sense of normalcy, but also educate on the evolution of society to include people that may, quote unquote, not necessarily fit in, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
And to include what everybody else said.
And that's even harder because we as a profession, I'm not sure I can think of another profession that works on macro and micro levels the way that we do. Maybe public health, kind of our cousin, and I guess medical researchers, whatever. But anyway, uniquely, we have unique careers that go from macro to micro, back to micro, back to macro. I think also the reason why social work is a unique business is because burnout and job transitions aren't abnormal. They are actually expected, right? Like that, it is actually expected to, well, I was a caseworker for 5 years and, I can't do that for another day or whatever. That's just so common. So we have to plan to be versatile. So not only are we finding new problems, adapting to new problems, advocating for things, we also on our own careers have to be versatile to manage the stress, the burnout, the financial stress of different jobs that we have. There's a lot of reasons why social workers have to be like Swiss Army knives. So where my business education comes into play, I decided to go get my MBA after a lot of social work careers or social work things, because it was just an overarching theme I saw of social workers not being confident in general about things that don't fall under our purview, like taxes or, how scary a grant application can be to some people because it seems nuanced and has accounting and things like that. And so all these other things that seem intimidating from when we're used to thinking about social, emotional, systems and interactions and emotions and things like that. So what business school really taught me is how similar in a way and how completely different it is. But the basic business mindset, every business is going to go down to the 3 Ps: product, place, and person, right? What are you selling? What are you doing? where are you selling these things? Is it the internet? Do you have a store? Is it a market? Is it your hospital? And person, who are you trying to use to buy your product or use your service or any of those other things? And the more I think about it, the more I envision social workers' careers as fitting into that mold, except that we are the product. We are the things that we are selling. We are uniquely designed and encouraged as social workers to bring ourselves to the job. To, if you were a marginalized person, you get to bring that to your career to help widen those margins. But that goes back directly to why it's so hard to be a social worker, right? It's difficult to be vulnerable, to have to share your story a million times, or to not want to share your story a million times, or to have moved up to a macro field where nobody really cares about your own individual story, or whatever. You guys can all see how these things spiral out and make a career difficult to navigate for a social worker. So the way I would encourage current professionals, but especially new students, to think about it is your career is your business. You need value statements for that, mission statements for that. What's going to define, what's the most important part about your business? Do you want to be defined by your level of service? Like I always want to do micro, or is it that you're motivated to work with a specific community? I always want to work with, neurodivergent children, either advocating for them or tutoring them one-on-one, and create a plan that assumes there's going to be burnout, that assumes that your goals and that the world is going to be changing, right? Let's just plan for that as we shape our careers, the same way corporations do with their business, right? Like think about how much, any giant corporation right now, an oil industry or an advertising agency, they're thinking about what product is coming down next, or where are resources coming from? It's the same type of thoughts that we give our clients or we give our nonprofits, but it just is with the idea of it being inward focused. The other thing to do is it's hard to know what you don't know in terms of creating and shaping your business. That's why I wanted to start with that story of how powerful it is to really stop and continually think about and ask yourself, what don't I know about my business, right? If you don't know what job you want to be doing when you retire, you might not know, things are going to change or whatever. Plans always change. Social workers are super good at dealing with that. But that doesn't mean that we can't have goals that might be a moving target, but a goal in mind for ourselves. And so how do we plan for those things? What do we do? What I would encourage everybody to do is to have some sort of evaluation mechanism for their business, for your personal career, right? We are uniquely shaped to drive our own businesses. So the evaluation metrics could look really different. We're trained to design these for our clients, for our organizations. Think about that just with the lens of your own career. It could be every year on your birthday, you reflect about what changes you had done that last year. What CEUs did you do? Did you do those ones that were like today, kind of free and easy and kind of convenient? Or did you challenge which is great. I get my CEUs that way too. But I also analyze myself and realize, when is there a niche that I could actually invest some financial resources, some time, some planning, and actually grow my own knowledge base to affect my career in a positive way. So what the most recent thing that's looked like for me is I went, and it was a financial investment, took a week off of work. That loses a week off of clients. That's difficult to manage besides the cost of the training. But I went and I'm EMDR certified now. And that completely changes my career, my practice, and the clients that I attract, which is a whole nother part of a business, is what kind of clients do you want to attract. But that's a different topic, a more complicated topic for a different day. So that makes me think a little bit too, knowing that you have a lot of students or graduating students here, or even other professionals. how do you weigh job offers? Where do you even start? I just Googled today, this morning, Tulsa social work jobs and Oklahoma City social work jobs, just to test the landscape and see what's out there. And there's plenty. We all know, a social work shortage. It's a crisis. It is a giant problem that I'm very professionally motivated in and interested in to solve and move the needle. But the benefit for professionals is there's a lot of opportunities. And so how do you know where to start, and how do you know what's going to be a good fit for your business? That's why I'm going to keep hammering it home. The idea of you are taking your business to a pre-existing organization or group. And the more I think about it, the funnier it is to me that lots of social workers actually are independent contractors inside these businesses. That was real evidence that I found and thought of after I had this conceptualization for how to imagine what the business of social work would look like or would mean. So for me personally, I started my career as a clinical inpatient social worker, which means a lot of, just like, what does a social worker do? A clinical inpatient social worker could mean completely different things depending on the hospital or the clinic that you're in. You could be doing substance abuse things. You could just be getting resources, like literally ordering oxygen tanks and doing discharge plans. You could be a transplant social worker and being a really active member of an intense clinical team. There are so many different things that fall under the umbrella of a clinical social worker. And so anybody on a job hunt or who's conceptualizing their business, I encourage you to really know what you don't know. Apply to so many things because it's free and because you're not going to really know what the job entails until you talk with people, until you interview with people, until you realize this job. We just had people talk from 12 and 12 and they have amazing, I'm like, well, maybe I should go work there if you were there. Amazing benefits, retirement packages, and all of these other things at a really high, in my mind, a high compensation rate. That sounds great, right? Sure, sign me up. But there are benefits that you can have from other jobs that aren't financial related. And unless you get in those interview rooms, unless you talk to the people who you would actually be working with, I think it's impossible to actually conceptualize what a social worker job is when you're applying for it, until you see the rooms, you see the people, you get realistic answers to those questions. Because otherwise, people who make those social work job postings frequently aren't social workers, we do so many things. We advocate, we do case management. There's a big misconception about the hats that we wear because we wear so many. Surgeons don't have this problem. They do surgery, right? This is a very unique to social work issue or dilemma, I would say. I'm not sure if it's a problem because I actually think it's pretty cool how diverse and mobile and moldable that we are. I don't think it's something I would ever wish to change, but I do think it's something that's very important for professionals at any level to have a level of awareness of and planning for. So I started my career, as I said, in the clinical inpatient world, and I cannot imagine what my career would look like without that. It's not the most lucrative job, but it was stable. It had good hours. I left at 5 o'clock every day. There were some real benefits just functionally for me and my family. But also what I learned was how to walk into rooms with angry people who are just complete strangers. I also learned, I was on a cardiac floor, that I learned how to work with interpreters because I literally dealt with I had not a million cultures, but everybody of every variety has a heart attack. I learned how to work with so many other systems that work inside the hospital. And I mean, it's innumerable. I could do a whole CEU on the benefits of starting with a clinical inpatient job. But I also knew and was planning for a career that was going to change, that I knew I was not married to being a clinical inpatient social worker. But I did also know that was the foundation I wanted for the other steps that I was going to take. Something else that I think is really important to talk about, especially for people who might be recently or about to graduate or have recently graduated, is how do you negotiate for yourself? Let's say you get a job offer, then what do you do? It's so exciting, right? Like the people from 12 and 12 just told us they have dozens of openings, and seem really motivated to hire people. That it is hard to not jump at a job offer. But remember, the silver lining of this social work crisis is that we all have a lot of opportunities. And it's okay to, in the moment, when you get the job offer, to go back to know what you don't know and ask those questions. The very first, you can do this all nicely and politely and in a friendly way. Like, we're social workers, we're friendly folk, right? It doesn't have to be adversarial or serious. But questions that you can ask are, after you say, thank you so much for the offer, I'm so excited, this would be a great fit for me. How long is this offer good for? Because I do need to talk about it with my family. And if they don't give you a specific time frame, depending on the agencies, sometimes there's regulations about the time frames. Depending if it's a state organization, sometimes there's laws about the time frame, how long a job offer is good for. And if it's just a private practice, an individual company, likely they can do whatever they want, right? But if they don't have a specific answer for you about a simple question, thank you so much, how long is this job offer good for? When do I need to get back to you by? I think that actually tells you a lot about the organization that you're considering taking your business to, right? This is where it's the foundation for your career, even if it's not your first job, right? It's still an important move. It's still an important move for you. So how they're going to treat you during the interview process is likely how you'll be treated as an employee. And the more transparent they can be, the more conversational, or if it's adversarial at the beginning, I've never accepted one of those job offers because it just seems like a giant red flag to me. But it's easy as a new graduate to feel intimidated or to feel just so excited to have the job offer. But let's put more thought into that. This is your business. This is your career. You deserve to make a thoughtful choice for yourself. Also, it's hard to ask for more money or other things that you want to negotiate for. I actually, ways to start this conversation, right? Just actually starting these conversations can be difficult and intimidating. So instead of, if they offer you X amount of dollars a year and Y amount of vacation days and things like that, you can just say, is there room to negotiate? Maybe they'd say yes, maybe they'd say no. That's a more passive way of starting the conversation. Another way is by saying, I would love to accept this job, but I would require X instead of what they offered. So X plus 5 or whatever it is. And maybe there's room, maybe there's not. But that also goes back to, if somebody is going to pull a job offer away from you because you try to negotiate, which is a very normal, common thing that's done in every world, right? Sometimes social workers get guilted out of that. Like, oh, it's nonprofit, it's grant funded, oh, it's about the mission. It's not about, we're not here for the salary, right? Like, I'm here for this mission. Well, sure. Obviously I am too. That's why I'm in this room interviewing. It's because I'm drawn to do this work, but it's also my business and it's also my life. And I need to eat, or go on a trip or whatever it is you want to do. The other thing to think about are non-salary things that you can negotiate for. Things like this could be extra PTO for CEU days. It could also be asking for a smaller caseload or a bigger caseload or whatever, depending on where you are and what your goals are for you. It could also be about wanting supervision to be included. It could be about having them pay for your licensing tests. That's not a substantial thing, but when it comes to paying the whatever $100 or whatever it is to take the test, it would be great if they did it. And so what I want to tell new grads who have never had to do this before, it feels a little bit awkward at first, but you just have to start asking the questions and understand that they are lucky to have you. And if they don't feel that way, then you get to go find another place, because again, the silver lining of the shortage is that you're going to have options. Another thing I want to talk about as social workers as a business. Let me check. Any thoughts or questions or anything that anybody else wants to mention right now? No? Okay. That's fine. The next thing to think about, I think, when you're thinking about your own business, right? This, how we're uniquely suited to be our own business, or like our mobile unit, is how beneficial a little side hustle can be. I could come up with a fancier version to call it besides a side hustle, but I think side hustles, that's really what they are. And social workers, we wear a lot of hats. We also have a lot of different areas that we can side hustle in. Different one that I do, I am now a court approved mediator for family, like divorces and family custody battles or things like that. It's not, well, I don't know, maybe other people know this, but I didn't know it until recently, that you don't need, there's no actual like licensure or education. Theoretically, anybody, literally anybody off the street could advertise themselves as a mediator, but there are trainings that you can go to for it, and then be on a court approved mediator list if you go to one of these trainings. But anybody can actually do it. I think, you want the best for yourself and have high professional standards. So like do the training. But that is actually very lucrative, because mediators make far closer to lawyer salaries per hour than social work per hour. And it's something that I'm developing relationships with divorce attorneys. I don't want to live my life in the divorce land, but I would be happy to do it once or twice a month, because it's different skills as opposed to counseling, which I do every day. Mediating, I get to have a voice at the table. I get to hold people accountable for their actions and their choices differently than I do in a counseling world. The goals are completely different, because the goal is already set. Like the goal is to get divorced. The goal is to find a custody agreement. And it's how to use my therapeutic skills to make both parties, or all of the parties, depending on how many are involved, to feel confident that it's the best solution possible. And just as an example of a not very common, I haven't heard it mentioned much in the social work community, but maybe I'm just in the wrong rooms. Another great hustle for social workers is to get, I'd love to get info on how to do that. Okay, I can let you know. Austin also knows, because Austin is also a court approved mediator. Some fun facts for the group. He's the one hosting this, if people don't know that. Anyway, another great side hustle for social workers is grant writing or grant reviewing. I think people know about grant writing, and you kind of know if that's in your wheelhouse of things that you like to do, because it's so technical. But grant reviewing happens depending on the grant cycles. There's so many different grant giving agencies. It varies, right? Small family foundations hire grant reviewers occasionally. The federal government hires grant reviewers. When the federal government does it, they'll put out proposals for, they're seasonal. They're like, the more you get, I could also do an entire CEU about being a grant reviewer. But just the basic info, there's kind of seasons for grant writing that align with the fiscal season, because you get money at certain times and you give money at certain times. And when the federal government or state governments are giving grants, they will put a call for reviewers. And so reviewers, probably now it's mostly digital, but back in the day, you would actually fly to Washington, D.C. for 3 days. You would be put in a group. You would all read 50 grants based on the evaluation metrics that they give you, and you would rank them. And so it's like a week-long project. That might not actually be super financially lucrative for you, because you would maybe have to take vacation, or if you're like me in private practice, you wouldn't make money that week. But it is so informative. If you think about think about knowing what you don't know, reading 50 different grant applications for an area of interest that you have, right? If you're a school social worker, you would be looking for Department of Education grants. If you're a clinical therapist, you'd be looking for mental health-based grants or community-based health grants, things like this. It is just so informative to learn about all of those different agencies, as well as meeting the other people in the room who you'd be doing the reviewing with. Another great side hustle is either volunteering or working on political campaigns, right? Social workers are uniquely, like we said, we're uniquely designed to see the problems, to see where the margins are, and to help widen those margins. A great resource for that, and to put all that knowledge, is into political campaigns. And, you know, just like with grants, there's also seasons of political campaigns. Lots of times, depending on your level of politics, that might be volunteer. But also, if you think about yourself as a business, put yourself in the rooms that are interesting or helpful or fulfilling for you to be in. And likely, if you volunteer on a couple of political campaigns and you want that to be financially lucrative for you, the more you do that, the more you're going to create a pathway for that to be a profitable arm of your business, to like really use business talk there. Another great way of having a little side hustle for social workers is consulting. Clearly, that's something that comes with more time, and you have to plan for that. But if you're about to graduate, or you're a student now, and you can think, ooh, there's a lot of flexibility in consulting. I would love it when I'm in my 60s to have a private practice and to be a consultant. I would ask you, okay, what my next question would be, for what area of need? Like, what do you have an area of interest? Then it's just decision trees. Just like we help make our clients make decisions, or we help our businesses or our nonprofits or our organizations make decisions, think about it as decision trees, right? If that's where I want to be by the time I'm 60, what do I need to be doing now? What rooms do I need to be in now? If I want to be a politician, I wish more social workers were politicians. Then put yourself in those campaign rooms now, maybe at a financial burden or loss for your business. It would be a less profitable arm of your business, but it's going to get you where you want to go in the long run. This goes back to my last thought about it, which it sounds like a lot, right? Like, we have jobs. We're going to have our job at our organization, or our own job, our own practice, wherever we're going to work. We have to think about that. We have to think about our mission or our clients, wear all those hats. I am now asking you to think about your own self as a business inside this business, also encouraging you to not really feel like you're in one single peg, right? We don't want you to feel limited or stuck or whatever, because that's not going to work for a social work career. That's how you'll get burned out. So I'm also asking you to think about all these side hustles that will add layers of enrichment to your career. So it brings us back to the most common buzzword, which is self-care. But I don't want to talk about self-care. There was a great presentation on it this week about different types of self-care and things. And so I think these are all being recorded. So if you want to think about self-care specifically, go back and watch that one. What I want to think about for just the last little bit of our chat here today is how advocacy is different than self-care. Because what I just explained, this professional career that I'm imagining for your business and for my business, is complicated. And it also is frequently underpaid, underappreciated, underrecognized, like all of these things that make it difficult. And that's why I was super happy, whoever put in the chat, you read my mind. The first person who said, that we advocate, I can't find it now. But anyway, what social workers do is we advocate. And I think that applies, we all know how it applies for our clients and our mission. We all know the layers in that world. But I wanted you to think about advocating for yourself as a business, right? That goes back to feeling confident enough to negotiate when you get the job offer, or maybe walking away from what some people would say, why are you turning that down? But you know it either isn't really what you want to be doing, or it's an unrealistic caseload, or the hours are too crazy, whatever reason it is, it's okay to walk away from a job that some people might be surprised that you're walking away from. That also goes into marketing yourself, which sometimes means doing things like this and like talking and having and spending my time reaching out to the community to be a part of it, to be involved, because we constantly move and shape and change our own businesses. You have to be actively putting yourself out there in a way that might not feel natural or normal for everybody. Just because we're social workers and we like engaging with the world in different ways doesn't mean we're all extroverts, or it doesn't mean that we all, feel great about saying like, I'm a competent clinician and you should trust me with your mental health crisis. That's a hard sentence to swallow for a thoughtful therapist, right? That's a big, heavy burden. But we do that confidently. We have to advocate for ourselves confidently. How else do you guys think we could advocate for our own businesses? Or does anybody want to? I know it's 3:40 on a Friday, so just chatting or unmuting isn't what people want to do, which, like, believe me, I get it. But I just wish that would be in the back of social workers' minds throughout their career, is how to not only advocate for our own professional causes and our own professional missions, but also professional social workers as a whole. If you think about it, my last thought about that, and then we'll be done, or you guys can ask questions, is if you think about how it's not a new profession, right? Social workers have been around since the dawn of time, helping feed people who are hungry and house people who need shelter. We've been doing that for forever. But in terms of licensure structure, and in terms of insurance reimbursement, in terms of nonprofit organization and how funding streams are coming in on every level in the social work world, we are a newer profession. I wish I knew when all states were, when I was in social work school, I graduated in 2007, not every state had a license for social workers. And I'm pretty sure they all do now. But even just that idea, like for me to just stop and think about intellectually, this is a baby career. Whereas you think about, let's see what he says. Wendy says, been in field for a long time and setting boundaries for self is the utmost importance. Keeping ethical or realistic standards for self is key to longstanding in this profession. I like that you put ethical and realistic standards for yourself. I think that is a good point. So if you think about like lawyers, they've been taking their bar and they've had their law degree for, 100 years or whatever, maybe longer. I don't know. That system is old and crotchety a little bit. Sorry, lawyers. Nothing personal, but that goes back to what I just keep saying. Not only are we so new, but we're also we created our licensure structure in a way I didn't. The National Social Work Board did it very thoughtfully. I don't know if we did that, but I would like to watch a documentary on the process of how social worker licensure was created, because please somebody make it and send it to me, because I think it's actually probably very interesting. Because how do you conceptually put micro and macro practices under one licensure? Some states don't. In Michigan, you can have a macro license or a micro license. Anyway, I'm getting off topic because I just think that is interesting. But anyway, all to say, by design, our new licensure structure, since it's newer, it was created by smart, high-functioning, thoughtful people who already knew that we are a malleable, moldable profession. And I just think it's really interesting that, for sure, if you have a career as a social worker, the social work profession will look different when you retire than when you start. It already looks different from 2007 when I got my master's to now. If you compare that to a surgeon or a lawyer, like you go to med school, you do your residency, you're a surgeon, done. That's not what our profession is like. And I think that people, professionals before me laid the groundwork to protect that part of it. The goal is to not have it be static, right? We don't want that as a goal. And so I just want everybody to have a layer of awareness about this, to have a layer of keeping that a goal. But so then you have to hold yourself accountable for that goal. How do I evaluate my own business? Do I have a buddy that we talk about our careers and our career paths? Do I do it every year on my birthday? Do I do it when I sign a contract every year? I just stop and think about it. Maybe you're like a type A planner who has a 5-year plan all written out, and then I'm jealous, and send me a picture of it because I would love to copy that energy. But the reality is we're all doing it differently. And I think that's not only really important, but also really cool, and also intellectually really interesting, that you could put a room full of social workers and people with masters or bachelors in social work, and we're all going to be doing different things in different ways. Because even if you have a private practice, I'm sure you interact with your clients differently than I do, and we can both get great results. I just think being a social worker is way better than being a surgeon. That's the thesis statement that I have for you today. I mean, kind of joking, but I'm super glad I'm not a surgeon. There's my ta-da. It's so hard without being in a room full of people. I don't know if anybody has any. I get it if you don't really have questions. I did want this to just be more thought-provoking than necessarily like pinpoint note-taking informative, but feel free to have questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. I think it's can be eye-opening, especially to people who are about to graduate. There's lots of different things we can do. I'm actually having a conversation in the messaging with somebody now that, it's not uncommon for us to do 2 or 3 things at once. Market yourself. I like that idea. We tell a lot of our students at OU, the first offer is not always the best offer. You don't have to go with it. Negotiate. And you're right. I like the point you made about how as social workers, I think we're sometimes kind of made to feel bad about that because we didn't get into it for the money. We got into it for the service, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be valued how we should be valued. So I really enjoyed that presentation. Does anybody have any questions? So what we'll do is I'll have Marianne share her contact information with me and with the school. And then if you guys have any questions at a later date you think of, you can email me and I can facilitate that communication between you and her. So that is going to actually bring to a close the OU Professional Development Week. It's been a great week. I think we had 16 speakers, 15 or 16 speakers. Thank you so much, everybody doing it. Thank you, Marianne, for being our final presentation. Save the best for last. Lots of good feedback on that. I think it was a great topic. Thank you all so much. We've dropped in the link, or we dropped in the chat the link to donations. So if you haven't done that and you can, please do. Also put in the chat the link to the CEU form. So if you need CEUs, make sure you fill that out today, turn that in. And then, like I said earlier, we'll be back in contact with you in regards to those CEUs. So if nobody has any questions, we're going to go ahead and close it out there. I'm going to stay on for 5 minutes to just answer anything that anybody wants to talk about. Otherwise, thank you all so much for attending.